All right. Let's dive into the biggest areas, the three biggest areas that we feel like coaches that we want to focus on first and foremost in upgrading in coaches. And the first is executive function. So, of course, I'm going to hand that off to our executive function expert here, Justin, to talk to us a little bit about what that means, why it matters, the clinical perspective, the coaching perspective, and give you some great tools and insight to be able to take with you.
All right. The executive functioning has been a very big buzzword in the mental health field around developmental psychology. And so the focus has been for a long time on children and adolescents. However, that's neglecting the fact that we've all been through our childhood and our adolescence. Us as adults and coaching need to like have an awareness of our executive function, evaluate our own, be able to share how other people are experiencing their executive functioning and how maybe that's impacting your relationship. And so this area I find to be so important to understand our consciousness level, but also like bring about the awareness for flexibility and allowing our brain, our nervous system to even regulate more, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Now, executive function, vague, basic understanding of it is a complex mental process and kind of cognitive abilities that we develop in our developmental ages, but through our life that help get things done. That's what we're talking about. We get things done. And everybody's doing things every day. I mean, whether that's in relating with others, whether it's in our business, in our relationship, within coaching, within athletics. And so the three big areas of executive functioning of a person is working memory, our mental flexibility, and our self-control. So working memory governs our ability to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information over short periods of time, but it's also important for processing and using and remembering information to come back at a later time. Mental flexibility is to sustain or shift attention in response to different demands or apply different rules in different settings. Self-control enables us to set priorities and resist like impulsive actions or responses. So as I'm saying this, I don't know if anybody else does this, but I think of people in my mind whenever I start to hear these words that are being shared. So difficulties with impulsive actions. Know anybody like that? Having difficulty with shifting attention. Know anybody like that? Anybody retaining information? Anybody like that? Well, one thing that we do as human beings is we adapt. And so some of us have created really functional adaptations of our executive function over time. Hence, the calendar on our computer has moved from the paper one to one on our computer that updates us every time we got a meeting in 15 minutes. Like that's externalizing our executive functioning in a way and creating an adaptation using the technology at hand. However, there's processes of our executive function that we're not effectively meeting the needs of our developmental process, which we can get into. There's several different theories on that around social developmental theory by Erickson. There's our moral developmental theory by Kohlberg, and there's our cognitive developmental theory by Piaget. Those all apply to some aspects of our development over time. If we're missing something in those needs in our childhood, or if we have experienced undue stress, trauma, if we've had any sense of criticism in our exercising our own autonomy, there is going to be an impact on our executive function. And so the awareness of that and bringing to the like forefront of our mind as we're coaching individuals that this is something that may be impacting them, we're able to say, whoa, 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 maybe we're moving to an area where actually we're not able to actually follow through with this demand of our coaching because there was an unmet need in our executive functioning and our development lower, that we got to address that first. I mean, how many people have we met that no matter what we're coaching them around, it doesn't, there's something they get stuck on. That's our human condition. There's somewhere we're going to get stuck. There's some resistance in something that we're teaching, something that we're sharing. And it's like, I wish I could just do that for you. Come on, like I want to do that for you, but we know that's not effective. So that and also the process of actually inserting ourselves more and demanding something that's not effective is actually further detrimenting the nervous system of an individual. So we got to be really careful. and understand what we're dealing with so that we aren't creating, whether it's further embodiment of a trauma, whether it's further struggles within a relationship, whether it's a further negative or critical dialogue or a core belief that someone has. So being aware of these functions of our brain as well as our developmental process is so important. Now, how do we build executive function? That's a great question. I mean, we definitely have what I share with you in terms of developmental theories where we can kind of evaluate some of the deficits or some of the struggles that we've experienced there. But we do exercises or thinking exercises around like core beliefs, understanding our values. Using non-judgmental language is so important for our building our executive function. Because if we come back to mental flexibility, the ability to have the flexibility to shift attention is greatly determined by whether or not we feel safe. So the availability of using language that is effective for talking to their nervous system or through that is going to be so important. So I've got tools that I use with clientele that talk about like we build interpersonal empathy. We can that process is so important because of that. We build there's a concept within Piaget's cognitive development that talks about object permanence. Object permanence is saying, you know, the simple way of saying, hey, if this thing that I have in my hand goes away, does it still exist? Well, how many people do we know that have messy desks, messy rooms? It's all because they're laying things out so that they know that it's there. They don't lose track of it. I mean, so many things around our structure of organization can be impacted by our executive function. So understanding and kind of evaluating those processes and the developmental process is really important. Those are all tools that I've yeah, fine-tuned over my 20 years of experience in the executive function, specifically with neurodiverse individuals. Are, I mean, it's so apparent sometimes. So it's really helpful for me to really refine my practice within that. Now, coming back, you know, I believe it's really important to have flexibility, to have the ability to kind of make mistakes and recover from them. I believe it is really important to have motivation. And so we want to draw from some of these key ideas within executive functioning to build that motivation, to build that flexibility, to be able to make mistakes, to be able to hear perspectives. Because we know in business, an agile business is sometimes the most successful, especially in the market like we're talking about right now, the agile business, but the agile person within that business are the ones that get promoted. The agile person within the relationship are the ones that experience deep connection. The person that is able to hear other person's perspective, validate them, have boundaries as well is so important in the executive function process. So the one huge key idea I want to leave with you here is that executive function, we aren't born with these skills, but we are born with the potential to develop them. And so intentionality is key. So working with people that have intentionality of building executive function, and I definitely something that I could go on for hours about how we can have intentionality with building it. But I want to leave kind of one intentional process with you today as we kind of transition into the nervous system. But one thing that connects with the nervous system and executive functioning is understanding core beliefs. Now, anybody that's done EMDR as a therapy, they talk about core beliefs or negative cognitions. So it's kind of a buzzword, and Paul brought this up earlier. It's something that a lot of people know about, but they don't understand the depth of it and what it's really doing for us, and identifying them and what we can do to be able to break some cycles that we've been in and be more agile. So a core belief is something that we believe internally about ourselves. It's really basic of an I am statement. Now, what happens is that we receive all of this input and stimulus day to day, and our brain filters it. But the first point of filter is actually right here at the base of your skull. It's called the reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system is solely determinant. I'm going to make broad statements on this, solely determinant based on core beliefs. If I believe I can handle something difficult, all of a sudden I have a switch. It's like a switch. I can go to my cognitive abilities and focus on those and be agile and flexible and be connecting with people. But if I don't believe I can handle it, so for some reason out there. If the core belief is I can't handle this, our switch turns towards more what's called a limbic dominant, which is the fight, flight, freeze response. And that's where we're not able to access our full capacity of our neurology, let alone be able to problem solve, be agile in that space. And so those understanding what those core beliefs are is so important to understand where the switch gets turned, right? And so being able to come in and connect with those, and then also recognize that some of those core beliefs were developed in childhood, and we can challenge those with certain kind of dialogue and thinking exercises, and through work on the nervous system, like Paul is going to go over. We can challenge those core beliefs, and some of that challenge of those core beliefs helps us better embody current core beliefs. Which
Justin, how often do you find that people underestimate what it takes to actually shift a core belief? You're talking
oh
about where it is. You're talking about, you're summarizing in really simple terms the kind of stimulus and the
yes,
kind of time that it takes to shift and create that. In our modern day and age, consciousness can sometimes be looked at as like a game controller for our mind. Like we can just say things and we'll believe it.
yeah.
You speak a little bit to like how much it actually takes to do this, that it's not a seminar and write things down and say it in your mirror every day kind of a thing.
Yes. Well, the voice is, you bring up one element. Most people do believe you say it, it'll come true. There's a big movement on manifestation if you want to get into that, but the positive affirmations, those are so powerful. I don't want to underlie those because they're a key component to the bigger process. But we're talking about one way that we're creating stimulus for ourselves. How many ways do we experience stimulus? I mean, there's the five senses, but I would actually say there's a six if we talk about proprioceptive sentences, um, like movement and space. Um, but how many different ways can we experience those? And so the complexity of that, of the senses that we integrate with the core belief, is so important because I mean, our olfactory glands can take us back like that to a memory really quick, whether it's a sour memory or a great memory of my grandma's cookies, and to be cliche a little bit, but the aspect of the olfactory gland can take us back to something because what happens is our hippocampus of our brain is it organizes our memories by emotion. And so all of a sudden, when our olfactory gland connects something of our senses to our hippocampus, it brings up that emotion to the forefront. And so not only the underestimation of this is that the typical person, when you experience one emotion, let's say one experience of stimulus, say, Paul, you offended me. Okay. You said something mean. I don't know. I got a receding headline. Yeah. Um, my brain is not only bringing up that emotion from that experience, it's bringing up 20 other ones from the past that are correlated in my hippocampus and my memory, my long-term memory storage with that feeling. And so I'm not only juggling and struggling or working through or processing why Paul has such a good hairline and I don't. Like there is there is other stimulus that we haven't even registered consciously that we need to bring to our consciousness. And we need to be able to say, in this moment, I am feeling this, not that, and practice that empowerment of the present moment. And so when we talk about the breadth of, I think it's vastly overrated or vastly misunderstood of how a core belief and working through a core belief can happen. And
And we're
so,
just talking about one of the executive function like pillars. And you talk about six senses and how many combinations of six things can you create to instill those. These are two of the biggest knocks that Justin and I have on traditional coaching and even traditional therapy in some ways, but especially traditional coaching, where you talk a lot more about your core beliefs and what you want to manifest and different things like that, is number one, a well-intentioned but gross underestimation of what it takes to actually shift a core belief. And number two is trying to do this all in the name of social agreements we don't understand.
mhm,
The shoulds in terms of outcomes. I think of the work you do with those who find themselves on the spectrum, neurodivergent. And one of the big breakthroughs that we've made more recently than people realize is, wow, they're not broken. They actually have unbelievable enhancements that don't fit the way this world is socially constructed because they don't get to the outcome the same way that the world says you should get to the outcome. Like you should have a clean desk. That's not true for everybody. You know, you should dress to impress. That's not true for everybody. You should be able to sit still. That's not true for everybody. There's it being able to break down some of these social constructs, not in a massive anarchist revolt and just see everything burn to the ground, but when our social shoulds are what are constructing the outcomes we want to create, we're going to violate the reality of us as a unique human being over and over and over again. And we may find ourselves, Justin, trying to create a shift in core beliefs that are actually more influenced by the social shoulds than what we actually feel called to create, right?
100%. 100%. And that's the realization of what am I embodying in my core beliefs versus what is being taught to me, told to me that I have. And so there is a critical period of our own growth, of development, where we are receiving all these messages of who we should be and who we could be. And talking about the shift that we're going to be experiencing culturally, I mean, we've already seen it in my generation I mean, we've been through a lot of like the heavy competitiveness to the trophy generation where you get a participation award, and uh, how hypocritical, or not hypocritical, how patronizing that may feel for our
Mm.
nervous system. I think, anyways, but we can get into full diatribe on that if we wanted to. But the element of understanding the language that we're using as well, the shoulds, is a huge part of our executive function. How
Not
are
just
we?
what we want the language to mean, what it actually means in those layers and those 20 memories and those senses. We are right now, everybody, we are touching on one of the greatest challenges in coaching today. And that is giving someone a mechanism or a device that only works for a short period of time. I mean, all of us have done it. We've all learned something or taught something, and we thought we found the answer because we did so much better for a couple weeks, or depending on what it was, or the kind of pressure and accountability we had in those social agreements that lasted for a couple of months. But reversion, 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 because we're not understanding some of these elements. And again, you don't need to go study them ad nauseum. We want to give the practical understanding as a coach for your niche, for whatever you do to get this. So let's talk a little bit about the power of questions, Justin, as we kind of wrap up this section.
Yeah. So here are some very powerful questions that you can ask in terms of understanding some core beliefs, though. So what what kind of situations do I keep attracting? What kind of self-talk, even thoughts, do I have on repeat? What kind of underlying beliefs could explain these patterns? Now, those three questions right there, I want to put on there that there's really little to no judgment laden in there. Okay, there's a objectable questioning of some of those things that we just experience as humans, that we repeat things, and it's not good or bad, but it just is. That's the importance of the questions that we can direct people. And so, some ways that we can identify the emotions, or the negative cognitions, or the core beliefs that we come through that come often, we can kind of understand the story that we're attaching to the emotions, or to the experiences. And so you can go into questions like, if I fail, it means what? If I succeed, it means what? If someone leaves me, it means what? If someone criticizes me, it means what? And it's not about, I'm just going to let that sit for a minute. It's not about how often we experience it. It's about how powerful that story has been, too. And so recognizing some of these storylines that keep coming up, we can bring in a lot of different, questions, and you can kind of create your own to even ask these of your own clientele to understand, like, what does that mean to them, and recognize how that may be helping them or hindering them, or whether that is, you can bring in some of the blind spots of whether that's based on a core belief that is not longer serving them. And it's a reframe that, we gotta understand. Sometimes when we feel an emotion, it really means something. However, emotions are transitory states. And so that meaning, it's malleable. We can change, we can adapt with those. We can understand, oh my gosh, it's not that I failed at something. It's I struggled and learned and came out on the other side with a journey that I never thought I was going to have before. When we talk about the changes in society, this is a human change. The spiral dynamics doesn't just talk about society; it talks about human neurology. We have to go through these changes, and when we recognize there's a spot of learning, the contemplation on that, and recognize that there is a leap, a hyper jump that is possible after that.
And I think of like a slingshot, you pull back to fly forward. If you think of that as sinking into where you're actually at, launches you to this next, that's the delta surge. That's the what gets us to the next alpha of society, of our lives, of consciousness, of whatever it is. And more than likely, you've heard questions like Justin just asked before. But make sure you remember what we were talking about before that, all the layers, all the senses, being able to feel through those questions, being able to consider them. The impact alone of it's not about how often, it's about how powerful. I think that's one of the things we underestimate in transformation is we just, well, I don't notice it, so it must not be a thing. And we have such a microwave society impatience that I'm going to come to you as a coach and say, can you get me there? Yes. For $10,000, I can totally get you there. Amazing. Let's do it. Well, foul on both sides. One, for the client looking to just get somewhere else. Why don't you want to be here? Because I don't like it. That's really the substantial answer, right? But one of the keys to executive function, one of the keys to transformation to growth is getting better at where you are, which means getting clearer and more aware of where you are, getting aware of deficits that are already here with the least amount of judgment possible, getting aware of how you got here in the first place. Because so much of those social agreements, so much of those underestimated cognitive intentions that just seem to have some, woo-woo fairy dust and everything's okay for everybody, but no one's willing to admit it because they all spent so much money to try and create it. So everybody just tries to make it look like it worked out of embarrassment. We want to slow things down. If you want to figure out how to get there and you're trying to go there, like think of, say, okay, here and 50 feet away, fastest human being on earth versus a slingshot. Ready, go. And you even give them a head start as you're pulling back. And then as soon as you release, it goes. This is what we talk about in terms of the tortoise and the hare. The hare is just go, go, go. The tortoise is present and aware and embodying who the tortoise actually is. And in doing so, creating this surge of natural growth, of sustainable growth. The era of consumerism has created a huge uptick in manipulated, unsustainable growth. And we live in a society where it's easier and easier to make it look like it worked. Everything works. Everything's poisonous. Everything gives you cancer. Everything saves you from cancer. Like if you minimize it and manipulate it and package it just right, you can make anything look like anything. And it's making actual transformation and growth incredibly difficult. And whether it's the war between religion, spirituality, and science, or the war between therapy and coaching, or whatever, like, wow, it's time to upgrade the middle of all that. And executive function is a core pillar in doing that.